Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm Anna Rafferty from the Salter Scholar Programme team. I'm delighted to see all of you coming, especially at this stage in the programme. It is still a very competitive process and we've really enjoyed receiving your applications to all of the internship roles that we've been receiving. The purpose of this session is to help you with your applications, so looking at your CVs and cover letters, building on the webinar that we did in January, which looked at the basics of how to put together an application. We're now able to bring an employer's perspective that will help you understand how to enhance those applications, both in the written CVs and cover letters, but also looking at the interview process as well. So with that, we have Mike Scott, who has joined us today. So Mike is the founder of Hydrogen, which is Scotland's largest social media agency. Mike has reviewed lots and lots of applications, so he will be able to bring that unique perspective on what he looks at when he receives applications, and just to give you some advice and tips about what you can be doing to help yourself stand out in a crowded market, just like the Salter Scholar Programme. So we'll be going through Mike's presentation and finishing up with a Q&A. So if you do have any queries during the session, if you could just hold your queries until the end, there'll be time for you to ask those questions. Before we get started, Mike, it would be great to just hear a little bit more about you. So we know that you're the founder of Hydrogen, but you must have been on quite a journey to get to where you are today. So really keen to understand more about that journey and how your entrepreneurial mindset has developed over the years.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining the call and listening to me for the next half an hour. I thought I'd put together a bit of a kind of slide introduction to who I am and give you a bit of an insight into myself. So I've got 20 years experience in the digital and marketing world. During that time, I've worked for 8 different companies. So you would think that actually that's quite a lot of moves. I moved quite a lot in my early career, and for me it was invaluable for me to see lots of different views, lots of different businesses, lots of different ways of working, and being able to sort of pick up experience along the way. Sometimes you land in the perfect business at the start. Other times it takes you a lot of moves to make that happen. And one thing I would say is if you've seen the No Wrong Path campaign, that very much is true for me. So when I started out working, social media wasn't even a thing. So the idea that I was going to become the founder and owner of a social media agency, just, it would have been a surreal situation. What I've done over the years is learn different techniques and different ways of working that I was able to bring to what eventually was my own company. I started Hydrogen, and within 6 years of starting Hydrogen, I was able to sell the business to the Press Association, which I'd done in late 2022. So I'm now in what is the next formation of myself, which is as an investor, as an entrepreneur, and doing things like this, which I absolutely love doing. You'll see lots of logos beneath that. I've been interviewed by the BBC. I've done a TED Talk. I've been published in the Herald and Scotsman Independent, and I've worked with numerous brands, just a few of them below there. But that's across quite a lengthy career. If you'd have said that to me on day one, or said that to me in the position that you guys find yourself in just now, I probably would have said that just wouldn't happen. I think what you tend to learn is over the years as you start to work, you'll see commonalities with lots and lots of industries, lots and lots of businesses. And it's allowed me to sort of form my own views on the sorts of things that people will find valuable, the sorts of things that I can then take to market, the sorts of things that people will buy into and sell, regardless of whether you're working in social media, you're working in web development. I work with clients that are in the housing associations and tech companies. They all have the same problems. Ultimately, it's about what you can learn from that situation and then develop that into what becomes your eventual proposition as an entrepreneur that you can then take to market that is valuable. I now have a proposition that can work across multiple different sectors, across multiple different companies, and multiple different countries. And that allows me to have something to sell. And I think that that's one of my biggest lessons across the years is listen, learn, and look for the patterns. You'll see these patterns come up over and over and over again. And if you see something come up over and over again and there's no solution to that, that's a gap. There's a gap that you can step into and potentially fill. Hopefully that might make sense, and it'll kind of take you on the road yourself. One thing I would say as well is throughout my career, I've always taken risks. I think that's an entrepreneurial mindset, and obviously given where you guys are in the Saltire program, I am a natural risk taker. And what I mean by that is I quite often jump into roles, and I have done it throughout my career, that I didn't think I could do. I genuinely didn't believe it. My first ever role was an internship at Microsoft. At that point in time, just to give you a bit of context, I was a computing science student at Glasgow. I was sat in the Boydor building, and I thought, okay, there's this internship come up for Microsoft. There's absolutely no chance I'm getting in there. There was 3,000 applications for 50 jobs, and I managed to get one. How? I have no idea, genuinely no idea, but I went through, it was 9 interviews, a 9-interview process to make that happen. But ultimately, without taking that initial jump, without taking that initial risk, I would never have got that internship. Similarly, throughout my career, I've taken jumps into roles that I probably shouldn't be able to do because I didn't have the ability to do that. So I became an AMD with no AMD experience. I became a global client services director when I was, when I was relatively young. I was 27 at the time, but I was working with a global business on global brands like Sony and Amazon. Can I do that? Should I be able to do that? Probably not, but actually you jump in and you learn on the job. And I think that entrepreneurial mindset of go for it, see what happens, learn on the job, move forward. That's something that allowed me to move forward at pace, and it's something I would encourage you to do. And I think that actually, given where you are, you probably all will be slightly like that. So yeah, it will stand you in good stead. So hopefully that's enough about me, and I'm not going to bore you any further than that. What I wanted to do is talk you through the processes that you're currently going through. So what we're going to talk about today is creating standout for yourself. So how in a marketplace where there's lots of people like yourselves stepping out there into the world of employment, looking for an internship, how do you create standout? How does your application stand out from the others? I'm going to break it down into 2 sections, that initial approach to a business, and then I'm also going to look at the interview process. But the key thing that I'm going to look at for you guys is the other side of the fence. So not only at Hydrogen, but throughout my career, I've probably interviewed hundreds of people. I've looked at thousands of applications. There's commonalities between all of them. And there's things that stand out for me. There's mistakes that I see all the time. And hopefully what I'm going to do is give you the other side of the fence. It's not something that a recruitment company or something that the Saltire team will talk you through. I'm going to view it purely from an employer's eyes. So to give you some context, looking at Hydrogen, we have received, and I was saying to the team earlier on, we've received this week alone 6 applications just out of the blue. And that is not uncommon for us in the business that we find ourselves in. So what do we look for to create standout? Because if you multiply that up, that's hundreds of applications every single year. So I'm going to give you that view on things. So where do we start? Let's start with you guys and start with some positives. You're in a fantastic location. First of all, you're in Saltire, which automatically gives you standout. Stand out from the other applicants. You're standing out from everybody else who's currently spinning off a degree program or in their 3rd year looking for an internship. You're here. That means you actually want to learn. Lots of people could turn around and say, well, I don't want to turn up to this. I don't have time to turn up to this. But you're here. You're actively looking for something at this precise moment in time. I can guarantee you, roughly, and it happens every year, roughly about May time, some people go, oh, I need to. I've got my exams out the way with. I now need to look at getting an internship, and we get bombarded by applications at that point in time. The fact that you're already thinking about it, you're already applying for it, you're already going for roles, means you're already ahead of the curve. And that leads me on to the last thing. It's the market. So you might think it's a massively crowded market, and it is. It's always been a massively crowded market. That's not changed. But what you are stepping into is a market that's buoyant just now. If we go back the last 3 years, we obviously had COVID, which would be a very, very difficult market to step into an internship program. Last year, inflation rates were going through the roof. So lots and lots of businesses were battening down the hatches and saying, we don't really know what we want to spend. So looking at an internship program, that might be seen as an expenditure that's a little bit too far for us as a business. This year things are different. Inflation's calmed down, interest rates have calmed down, the market's starting to stabilise. We're seeing that across the board with a lot of our clients, and that will be the same for you guys. So because budgets are higher this year, things like internship programs and applications and junior level roles, there'll be a lot more in the market than there have been in the last 3 years. So you combine those three things: salt tire, the fact that you're here, you're already preparing, and you're moving into a buoyant market puts you in quite a good position to previous years. In terms of what we want to talk about though, in a world where every role has thousands of applications, how do you stand out? And what I want to talk to you about is creating brand you. Now, it's a bit of a strange statement, but you need to start to think like a brand. You need to start to think about selling benefits and not features. And what I mean by that is loads and loads and loads of applications come through the door. And if you think about an iPhone, really simple one, they could talk about features to the cows come home. You know, we have a camera, you can talk to people, you can text people, you can access social media. That's all the features of it. iPhone don't sell that. They sell the lifestyle that comes with that. That's how they sell a brand. If we think about that in an application context, if all you're selling is the grades that you have, the uni that you go to, the part-time job that you've done, every single application that comes through the door has all of those features. Just like every phone, Samsung, iPhone, whatever else it happens to be, they all have the same features. So what makes you buy an iPhone versus a Samsung versus somebody else? It's the brand that they build in round about it. You need to start to focus on your applications and differentiation and the impact that you can make either in the role that you're going to perform for them or previous roles that you've delivered or things that you've done in your life. Because they want to understand why they need to bring you in the door. If all you sell is all the little features that you've got, and when I mean that, the grades that you've got, which everybody's got a first or a 2-1 or they're aiming for that, they've all got certain grades, they've all got certain A levels, higher standard grades, that's ultimately the same stuff that everybody else has got. How do you stand out? And ultimately, the reason you do that is you need to start to create a connection. So, I know not all of you will be marketing students, and I never done marketing at school, by the way. I never done marketing at school, I never done marketing at uni. I started off in computer science. I was a developer when I came out. Pretty rubbish at it, but I was a developer when I came out. So for any interaction or any application, just like a marketing student, you need to start to think about yourself as a mini brand. So you think about brands that you buy for, you think about coffee shops that you go to, the makeup brands that you buy from, the t-shirt brands, the bag brands that you buy from. It's all because they create a connection with you. Sometimes it is just because the product's on sale and it looks nice, but actually the brands that you buy into, the coffee shop that you continually go back to, there'll be a number of reasons why you buy into them. And ultimately, if you don't create that connection with the employer, you're never going to get through to them. They're never going to buy you as an organization. So if we think about Starbucks versus a small independent, you may choose one or the other, depending on who you are as an individual. Some people love Starbucks, some people love the big corporate brands, some people love small independents. But if we think about a small independent, and we've got to view yourself as the employer, in this situation, you're the employer. If you think about small independent coffee shops and you think about the high street that you could potentially shop from, there's literally hundreds of them in Glasgow that you can go to and purchase from. But I almost can guarantee you that you will have one or two that you love. And there'll be a number of reasons why that. It'll either be because their product, their coffee, is the best coffee. But I'll be honest, it's probably unlikely to be the reason that you shop from them. It will be a number of other factors. It'll be the feeling when you go in there. It might be the brand story that sits behind them. It might be the good deeds that they do from a charity level. It might be how they interact in social. How do they present themselves? Have you bought into them as a brand? Have you bought into them as an employer? You know, what is their brand purpose? Is it that they're helping out small coffee makers in Colombia? There's loads and loads of reasons that you'll buy into that brand. And that goes deeper than the physical product. So if you think about all of these reasons, what I'm going to talk to you about is how do you build brand you and create a connection with that employer. So there's a concept that I talk to a lot of my clients about, and this concept is a thing called the digital shopfront. So if we think about the world today versus the world 20 years ago when I left university, the world back then, there was physical shop fronts. You used to go to a high street and there would be physical shops laid out there in front of you, and you would buy from a shop based upon what their shop window was. You would walk down that high street and that shop window would determine whether that was the sort of shop that you would like to go into and buy from. That doesn't necessarily exist anymore because, to be honest, most people buy online. So what we need to do is think about that digital shop front. But unlike the high street, which is your common high street, and you get to know these brands and you get to know these shops, you guys exist in a world that would probably be more like the high street you find when you go to a different country. You know none of these brands, none of these shops, none of these restaurants. It is a blank high street full of brands that you don't know. And what you have is a shop front that you need to determine whether you want to enter at that precise moment in time. So let's transport you to Lisbon. And you're walking down the street in Lisbon and you've got to make a decision at that point in time whether I want to go into a shop or not go into a shop, right? And that will either be based upon the brand that person sees on that shop front. So if we think about those shop fronts as being your applications, we have literally, as an employer, got 20 shop fronts laid out in front of us, and we have an instant response that we need to make to them. Every single shop front has a window display and a sign. So let's say the window display is your application letter and the sign is your CV. That's all we as an employer have to work on. Now, I can guarantee you, if every single one of you was going to Lisbon, there is not one of you that doesn't go on Instagram before you go. There is not one of you that's done all the research digitally before you go to determine where's the best places to eat, where's the best bars to go to, where's the best shops to go to, what are the coolest destinations to go to when you're in the city. That is the research that you can do in the digital shop front. So you can elevate yourself as a brand. So if I then take myself to that high street in Lisbon, I can walk down that high street and have preconceived ideas about the sorts of places I want to go. So all of a sudden, I've not just got a blank list of shop fronts, i.e. a blank list of applications. I have a behind the scenes that I can buy into. And I've decided before I go to that high street that yes, I might, on the spur of the moment, go somewhere else. But the reality is I'm probably going to go to particular destinations because of the digital shop front that's been built up behind that. So what you can do is you can elevate your physical space with a digital space. I know it's a bit of a skewed view of the world, but it's just to try and get into your head, how can you make your application stand out? We can do that digitally, and I'm going to talk you through ways to do that. So, I understand in your world, experience is limited. You can't sit there and say, I worked for 25 different places and these are the lessons I've learned in that space. But what you can do is you can talk about experience that you have and that is relevant to that individual, right? The amount of CVs that I see on a regular basis that come through, and you lead with education and you talk about education and what you've done from a university perspective and from a school perspective and grades. And then you say, I've worked in Sainsbury's in a part-time role, and I've maybe worked in a cafe in a part-time role. And because of that role, I have great customer service experience, and therefore I love working with people. That goes back to the features element. That's what everybody's saying. What I would say is, well, actually, if you're applying for a role within the social media business, show me, in my case, why you love social media. Talk to me about experiences that you've created for yourself. So you don't need to have a professional role to work in social media. If you say you absolutely love it, talk to me about how you've maybe built your own brand on social. Talk to me about what you're doing for yourself. Talk to me about how you're helping out the local cafe that you're doing for nothing because you've just made that experience for yourself. You maybe walk in and say, hi, can I help you out with your social? I'll do your social for you for nothing. I just need the experience. Maybe just your mate's band that you're promoting. Whatever it happens to be, if you're applying for an e-commerce business, create a little t-shirt brand that you can do on the side and maybe just do something that shows you've got a real desire and a real passion to make that work, because that really elevates your CV, shows them that you're a free thinker, that you're not waiting for physical experience, that you've gone out there and done it yourself. And whether it's a charity, and there's loads and loads and loads of charities would bite your hand off for this sort of thing. a little local shop that potentially is doing badly, but you're thinking, well, tell you what, I'll try and take you on and move it forward for you. How can you show the passion that you've got coming to life? So think about the company that you're applying for and thinking about what's relevant for them, and how can you go out and show them that you know what you're doing. You're an entrepreneurial person, that you're not going to wait for experience to come and get you, you're going to go and find it. You also need to think about the values that you have. So what values that you have that are really strong to you, and how do they apply to that business? So if you think about those sorts of values, if that business is coming across as somebody who's a hard-working organisation, maybe they really care about the environment. Maybe they're B Corp, so therefore if you've got real strong environmental credentials, how do you bring that to the fore? Because that will then create that connection that you've got between yourself and the brand that will make you stand out. So again, if we think about everybody applying with the same job roles, but you then elevate your environmental credentials towards a company that is B Corp certified, that will really sort of, it'll create that connection between yourself and themselves. Visionary, if they're a visionary brand, if they're somebody who's always forward thinking, who's trying to basically stay on the bleeding edge of technology, what is it that you do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, to keep yourself up to date with what is the top notch technology? What is the research that you put into that? Because again, that's the sort of things as a brand that they really want to hear. And then if we think about the presence that you have online, your digital presence, and every single applicant that gets through Hydrogen, we will research you, regardless of where you are, and we will try and find your social media presences, and we will look behind the scenes if we can. Because that's going to tell us a lot about you as an individual that goes beyond your application. So, two things you can do here. Lock them down if you don't think that they are business appropriate. And I'll tell you a horror story about that in a minute. And if they are business appropriate, make them sing, polish them up, and make you stand out, because that might give you the edge. If they've had a look at the application, they quite like that, then they look behind the scenes and they can see an active LinkedIn profile, maybe an Insta profile that really shows them that you are let's say you're doing some charity good work, or you're quite a forward-thinking individual. If that chimes into the values of that organisation, make that sing. Make them really understand who you are as a person, because then when you turn up for the interview, they've already got some preconceived ideas of who you are and potentially why they should buy into you. And the last thing, and a lot of people get this wrong, match your tone to the business tone. If they're quite a chilled, relaxed business, don't be doing an application that's dear sir, madam, like lots of big words. Don't make it too formal. Reduce the formality in it, and actually, because you're trying to match your tone to their business tone, because they need to feel like you're going to be part of the culture that they want to employ. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. And what I'm going to talk to you about is some common mistakes that I see all the time. And it's just some pitfalls that you guys can hopefully learn from. Standard approach. This is the hardest thing for me. The amount of times I see the same application that comes through the door and it's not been tailored to the organisation. It's just somebody's written a standardised CV and a standardised application letter, and the first thing that they do is it's almost that spread betting approach to things. And you know that you're probably one of 100 businesses that they've applied to. Obviously, from a Saltire perspective, it's slightly different, but this is obviously some lessons that you can learn that will be useful to you across the board. If you're thinking about an approach, don't just go for the standardised approach. Try your hardest to tailor that application letter and that CV to that organisation. Match their values, match their tone, match them as an organisation. Figure out what it is that you're going to bring to the table that's going to make you stand out. There's been no pre-work done, and what I mean by that is there's been no research into the organisation. So you don't call out the organisation in the application letter or in the CV. As an employer, I want to see that you really want to work for me. I don't want to feel like I'm just one of the 50 companies you're trying to get a job from. I want to feel, and it might not be true, but I want to feel that maybe this is the only company you're going to apply for. That I feel like you've done all the research and Hydrogen is the business that you want to come and join. Because that makes me feel that I need to have a conversation with this person. So doing some pre-work, calling out stuff that the business has done, calling out business culture, calling out potentially the growth trajectory of the business, all of these sorts of things really make you stand out and connect with the employer. There's also a thing that I see all the time, and it's the focus being on you. So the applications come through, and it's what we will give you as an applicant. I will give you X amount of experience, which would be great for you and your future career. That's one thing, but ultimately for me, I want to see, well, what are you going to bring to the table? What are you giving me back? What new way of thinking are you bringing in? You know, you're a young individual. What new ways of thinking, what future proofing are you going to bring to the table that will make us succeed as an organisation? Because ultimately there's a cash outlay and that then needs to be reciprocated in some way. So it can't all just be about the learnings that we're providing you. So spin it round. Make it, how can you help them? Because that's, as an employer, that's what you want to hear. Ultimately, we understand we're helping you out in your career, but it needs to be a value transaction. Socials are open. We see this all the time, and like I said, we will find you. And if you're applying for a social media agency, that's really important for us. You need to know how to manage your own social profiles. So I remember this amazing CV that I said that I saw, and I was like, this guy's brilliant. We need to get him in for an interview. And he added his links for his Instagram and his Facebook on the CV. So the first thing I done was clicking them. His profile photo was him sitting on the toilet, spliff in one hand and a bottle of Bucky in the other hand. And I just was like, oh my God, I can't hire this guy. I physically can't hire this guy. And the reason, because if I'm going to make him be in charge of one of those huge brands that I just showed you, he's going to be in charge of those brands' socials, he can't be, because they just need to look behind the scenes, and that's the first vision that they got of him. So therefore, I had to actually email him back, and I told him, I said, well, look, here's some advice in the future. Unfortunately, we can't give you a job, but it's just some advice for you guys. Either if they're open, polish them. If they're not open, lock them down. But think about ways that you can stand out. There's also an assumption of time. So if you're going through a process like this, if you're a large enough organisation, you may be going through an HR department. If you're a small organisation that you're applying to, you may be coming to people like myself or the senior leadership team. The assumption is that we have lots and lots and lots of time to sit down and actually plough through this content. We don't. And quite often you're diving between meetings, or you've maybe allocated an hour to go through all of the applications. So in some cases, we might have 100 applications for the job. And obviously I know through Saltire that is whittled down. But even at that, the assumption is that we won't read your whole application. We will skim read things. So what you need to do is think about getting the important information up front. Make it as easy to digest as possible. Using bullet points, using things that are going to really kind of stand out to me, but don't make it too short. There was a period where 10 years ago, I think it was, and it was like the one-page CV. And if you can cram all your information into a single page, fantastic. But if you can't, don't try and make it quirky. Don't try and make it like be too condensed. 2 pages is cool. Don't go to 4 or 5 pages and War and Peace. That's just, again, that's going to tell me that you're not a good communicator. You're not going to be able to get the advice across or get your information across. And when I mean don't be quirky, I've seen CVs that like maybe spell out the person's name with the first letter of every sentence, or the word hire me, or whatever. Like, and it's just right. Yes, it's quirky, but it really doesn't make you stand out. This really needs to kind of shine through as being you. So if that's not you and it's not your values, don't do it. So hopefully that all makes sense, and hopefully that gives you a sense. So if you need to doing some pre-work, creating a connection with an employer, aligning to their values, aligning to their tone, selling yourself as to why they should buy into you. And think about the brands that you buy from, that little coffee shop, the values that they put out there, their social media presences that make them stand out above the coffee that you buy from them every day. That's the sort of things that you could potentially focus on in your head. And think about all the little things that you do around about your life that you maybe don't think are important. Maybe it's like you're the captain of your sports team, or you know, you run a guides group or something like that you don't think is key. But actually these things might be, if you're running a guides group, you can corral a whole bunch of kids into doing something That's good. It's good organisation skills. Bring that to the fore. Show that as a passion, and like helping give back to the community, and that might align to the brand that you're signing up to. Don't focus on I work in Sainsbury's part time and I serve customers. So hopefully, from an application perspective, that'll align to you. So let's get to the next stage. You've been invited to the table. This is where it gets hard, because a lot of you probably have not been in this situation, and if you have been in this situation, you've not been in it a lot. So what are the sorts of things that we look for as employers? Because this is when you start to engage with that employer. You've gone past that shop front. You're now starting to engage with them. You've got in the door and they want to see who you are. So how do you initially respond? So they've maybe invited you to an interview. It's dead awkward to write that email back. What I would say is just mirror their tone. If they're quite relaxed, mirror it. Don't be excited. Be, that's great, fantastic, that's amazing, looking forward to it. Be eager. Show them that you're eager and you want to. You're looking forward to it. But equally, don't be too formal. If they're really relaxed, don't be too formal. If they're really formal, don't be too relaxed. Mirror their tone and make sure that you stand out. If you've got some initial questions, think about them beforehand. Maybe add them into that initial response, but don't add in too many. Because as an employer, we want to see that you're a free thinker, that you can think for yourself, that that you're not going to ask 1,000 questions. And I've had this quite a lot, where maybe potentially somebody's been coming for an interview and they've maybe sent me 4 or 5 emails by the time that they've come in for the interview, and I'm like, by that point in time, I'm like, you're tiring me. Like, I actually can't, so I've already got a preconceived idea of who that person is. So think about condensing them. Think about it from an employer's perspective. I might have 10 people coming in for interviews. If every single one of them acted like that person, I would have 50 emails to respond to. That would be a really, really labour-intensive process, and that's not something I necessarily want. So if you feel like you're going to be somebody who's constantly asking questions, condense them. Think about a single email. Think about ways to get answers to those questions without asking the person. What should you wear? If you're going for a relaxed agency, don't wear a suit, because that's not what the agency is all about. Our team in the summer walk around in flip-flops and shorts and t-shirts. Be smart casual, walk along, but try and mirror what the agency or the environment you're going to go into is like. If you're going into a compliance environment and everybody's shirt and tie, go in shirt and tie. Be business. Try and align yourself to that. And quite often we see it going both ways. So we will see people coming into our clients' offices for an interview, and they'll be far too casual because they are formal places. And similarly, in the reverse, we will see people turn up for interviews with us in full suits. And I'm like, that's not necessarily what we want to see. We won't judge you entirely on what you wear, but it will create an initial connection. It's something that it's a question that you're going to ask in your head. What should I wear to an interview? Don't be too relaxed. Don't be too scruffy. Smart business casual is generally what I would do. Figure out who you're meeting. This is super important. So you will probably be invited to an interview, and you will see in the meeting invite who's potentially going to be there. And if they don't tell you, maybe ask. Because do some research. Sit down and think about who's in the room. Are they HR? Are they the business owners? Are they the department heads? And do a bit of back research. Look at them on LinkedIn. Figure out what their careers look like. Figure out who they are. Maybe understand what drives them as an individual. Think about the departments that they work for, because the people in the room are the people who are ultimately going to make the decision. So if you can create connections with them when you're in that room, because you know who they are, you know what departments they run and what their kind of drivers are as a business, that's super important. And the amount of people who don't do that and they don't have a clue who they're going to come and meet is really low, actually, if we're perfectly honest. Don't assume we know lots about you. We will have done research. Sometimes it will be the junior members of the team who have done some research on behalf of the senior members of the team. We'll have done some research potentially. We'll have an application letter and a CV in front of us, but don't assume that we know lots about you. So come prepared for telling your story. Bring yourself to life. And how to make a first impression. I always remember this. My second ever professional job, I spoke to my manager, and this was about 6 months on, and she said, "Mike, I'd hired you before we even got to the meeting room." And I said, "Okay, why? That doesn't make any sense. And what happened is basically it was a big corporate office, and we'd met in the reception, and it was a lift and then a walk along a corridor. So in the time that we'd met in the reception, we'd got in a lift, then we'd done a big long walk along the corridor to the meeting room, we'd had a conversation. That little time window, lots of people talk about that first 5 minutes, and it is key. So how do you make a good first impression? So even the simplest of things, when you come in, shake somebody's hand, look them in the eye, have some chat, have some chit chat, just have something ready, try and relax yourself, take a deep breath, calm your nerves, because I know that it's super, super, super nervous and it's pretty hard to do, but try and calm yourself down beforehand. Convince yourself that because you're already in the door, you're already doing great. So, calm yourself down, get yourself in a position where you can talk to that person, get yourself in a position where you can shake their hand, look them in the eye, and really convince them in that initial period where potentially somebody's getting you a glass of water or whatever, you have that relaxed conversational piece. Chat and try and get brand new, that personality across. Try and ask them questions about, what's going on in business. Maybe just have some canned questions. How's your day been? What are you guys up to at the moment? Any big projects happening, etc., etc. But it just shows that you're interested in them. Or I saw in your recent Instagram post or your recent LinkedIn post that this happened. Tell me more about it. Show genuine interest in that organisation, because that makes a really good first impression. And I really think that that's something that gets overlooked quite a lot. See, once you're actually in there and you're getting asked some questions, craft your story. You're sat there, you need to tell them why they need to buy into you. Why you? Have some research that you can reference. Talk about things that you've done in the past or things that they've done as an organisation. If they give you an assignment, do not rush it. The amount of times I've seen people and they go, oh, I didn't have enough time to make this happen. That's the last thing I want to hear as an employer. Like, that just puts me at the bottom of the pile. Don't want to do that. Have some questions for the end. Not lots, maybe 2 or 3 questions that you can just go, what's the working environment like here? Can you talk me through an average day? Like really kind of just simple questions, but maybe it's based upon some of the research you've done. And TikTok tells you to do this. Do not do it. Do not interview them. So as an employer, if I feel like I'm being interviewed and I'm getting bombarded by question after question after question, that to me makes me feel like, are you going to be hard work when we bring you in the door? Are you somebody who I'm going to enjoy working with? So yes, ask questions and stuff like that. But yeah, I've had people ask me 10 questions, really in-depth questions. And I'm like, you've not got the job yet. Like, so how can you ask those sorts of questions? So again, try and think like that. So common mistakes when there's no knowledge of the company. You guys do your research. Make sure that you've got a basic knowledge. Do not turn up too early. Like, see 15, 20 minutes beforehand, you're just going to end up sitting in a reception room and actually become an issue for the people, because there might be another interview in ahead of you. So you don't want these people to see each other sometimes. Turn up 5 minutes early. That's probably a good window. That's an expectation. Whereas if you're 20 minutes early, I now need to think about coming away from a meeting that I'm potentially in, sorting you out, getting you a glass of water, and then going back into that meeting. 5 minutes early, do not turn up late. And if you are turning up late, try and give them pre-warning that there's an issue. Create those first impressions like I talked about. I have questions for the end. When I mean don't be too familiar, I've had people WhatsApp me and chat me and call me mate and all this sort of stuff, and before they come to an interview, don't be too familiar, because again, I don't know who you are. Like, I've got this very limited view of you as a person. Don't be overly familiar. And the hardest one at the end is nerves. You have a half-hour window sometimes to really sell yourself. Take a deep breath. Think about ways to calm yourself down. If you can't talk and if you're really nervous, I feel for you, but it's really, really difficult in that half-hour window for me to buy into you, because the next person that comes in may be not that nervous. So just to recap, and I'm conscious I'm slightly over time, is do your research. Get to know, understand them as a business. Consider ways that you can stand out as a result of that research. Tailor your approach. Make sure that it resonates with them as audience. Build your digital presence. Why don't you start following the businesses that you're applying for? Like some of the posts. In fact, if you know who you're meeting, connect with them already on LinkedIn. Maybe like some of the things that they've done. Maybe comment on some of the things that they've done. Because all of a sudden, out of the 10 people, they might recognise your name. And you go, all right, you're already really active in the digital presence. your name stands out. It gives you a slight edge. Prepare for the day. Understand what you're going into. Understand some questions that you've got to ask, and really kind of make yourself sing in that half hour or 45 minutes that you're in the room. Hopefully that all makes sense. Do you want me to stop?
Great,
Do you want me to stop
Thank
sharing?
you for running us through all of that content. There was so much there, both for the applications and the interviews, which I know will be of great relevance, both for the Saltire Scholar Programme just now for the candidates, but generally for, they're in their penultimate year and final year at university. So graduation will be here before they know it. So all of this advice is so relevant for any role that they apply to in the future. So thank you, huge thank you, Mike, for going through all of that. We can open it out now. I think just enough time for some questions. So if you do have a query for Mike, please use the raise the hand function, and we'll get to you. I'll start with a query if that's okay, Mike. So in terms of receiving the applications, are there any particular standout ones that come to memory straight away that have just been amazing through and through? Their cover letters, CVs. What was it about that application that stood out? Just when that's when you talk about first impressions, can you remember of any examples?
Yeah, so there's one that actually really stands out. This person bypassed the whole cover letter and CV piece. They basically sent us a link and they'd created a whole Instagram feed, which was their CV, their cover letter. Basically, you clicked into it and it showed you what they were passionate about. It showed you videos. It was running reels. Basically, they created an entire fake Instagram feed, which sold them to them, sold us them, but also showed us that they knew exactly what to do in the social space. So that really stood out. But you guys could think about doing things that maybe make you stand out. Can you do a video on, and link to it from your CV? Is there things that you can do behind the scenes that make your CV different? It doesn't always need to be paper. You could create digital presences that make you stand out. You could think about creating an Instagram profile purely for that organization, and it's like why you should employ Mike.
And coming back to your point about making connections, so you mentioned about aligning your personal values with the values of the company. So a candidate could be doing their research in the company and they could be demonstrating that in their applications. In what way does the authenticity come across? Because in that initial application, it's black and white. It is that first impression. In what way can someone authentically get across that that genuine alignment of values, for example?
I think in talking about the business that you're applying to, so I have seen that brand X or your business has done X, Y, Z. This really rings true to me as an individual because I love X, Y, and Z, and this is what I do in my world that aligns with that. So talking about the business that you're joining, that really that helps rather than just talking about yourself. You're creating that connection to that application.
So really putting more of a focus on that. And it's the other point we're talking about, it's been about your focus, it's about contributing to the company and understanding what the company is about and the role and responsibilities. Just looking, it doesn't look like anyone's got their hand raised at the moment, but what we will be doing is sharing the recording of the session. Oh, hello, we do have a hand up. So we've got Sarah. Bear with me just one moment, Sarah. And we'll unmute you.
Is that it there?
Yeah.
I think I can hear you, Sarah.
Hi. Thank you. Mike, you were saying about how you should mention the company and things in your CV to reference your own values and how that aligns with them. I found that a lot easier to do in the cover letter. How would you recommend doing that in the CV where it is obviously a lot more about yourself?
Yeah, it's things like, if you think about, let's say that one company is future thinking and one company is environmentally focused, let's say in their values. So it's maybe that initial statement and that you then sort of say, well, from an environmental perspective, let's say that's something that's true to you and what you potentially have done from an environmental perspective or from a future thinking perspective, you adjust that initial statement to say that. You potentially look at things that you've done that may be outside of your job roles or your degree course that maybe ring true to that. So to say that I'm future thinking, this is what I do to keep on top of, you know, future technology, etc., etc. Does that make sense?
That does, yeah. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Super. We've got Ioannis. So Ioannis, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi.
What should we wear in an... Sorry?
Can you go?
You talk. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, on you go.
Okay. Sorry. What should we wear in an online interview?
In an online interview. Again, it's the same. It's the same. So, you know, I'm sitting in a shirt just now. I don't necessarily sit in my own house in a shirt, but because I'm doing this, I am. So there's a point of going, looking maybe a bit, you know, smart casual, probably. I think more on the online side of things, consider the room. Consider what's round about you. You know, you can't blur your background. If you're in a student accommodation that's particularly messy or whatever, blur it out. You know, think about, because this is their portal into you. So you want to either think about your background, think about ways that it will either add to your brand or detract from your brand. So if your background is entirely messy, if you're sitting there in a t-shirt, maybe you're sat on your bed with it on your knees, and I mean, if that has happened, that shows you complete disinterest. But if you set up a room and set up an environment, then it shows that you're thinking it through. It's something that you need to consider.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ioannis. So if there aren't any more queries at the moment, we will we'll wrap up there. So just again, a huge thanks to Mike for your time today and for sharing all of the information for the candidates. The recording of the webinar will go up on the candidate pool webpage just for you guys. So have a look